life-changing, where your life can never be the same, and this appears certainly to be one of them.
It is Tuesday morning, the 11th of September, and you will not forget this date.
Lifted scenes while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, neath the halo of a street lamp. I turned my collar to the cold and damp. When my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touch the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking. People hearing without listening. People writing songs that voices never shared, and no one dared disturb the sound of silence. Fools said, "Are you too numb?" Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words that I might teach you. Take my arms that I might reach you. But my words, like silent raindrops, fell and echoed in the wilds of silence. And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. Inside flashed out his warning, and the words that it was forming. In the signs and the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls, in tenement halls, whispered in the sound of silence.
That's going to be tough to follow. I had so many jokes to tell. Good evening. I'm Tony Mobley, Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Granbury. We have a city treasurer here, Julia Pinnell. She promised she was not going to speak today, And that 5-minute speech you just heard was her not speaking. I love this woman because she laughs at most of my jokes. Julia, when she was at the planning committee for this event, they said they wanted some VIPs from the city. Well, of course, Julia speaks up and says, "Hey, I know the mayor." But she didn't know as the mayor's on vacation. She said, "Well, I know the city manager, Chris Kaufman. But he's in San Antonio for city business." So since she couldn't think of any other VIPs from the city, she said, "Tony, if you'll do this and you bring Trish Reiner and Greg Corrigan, we'll let you speak." And my lovely wife, Kathy. That was actually the first name she mentioned. I can't tell you how glad I am to be here. We've all seen the memorial services today, all day, and it reminds us of why we're here. 17 years and 1 day ago, September 11th was just going to be a Tuesday. And every person in this crowd, if you're over the age of 18, you know where you were when you heard about it. I was driving to work, had a business in downtown Dallas. I was listening to sports talk radio, and they said something was going on Good Morning America. And they said, "I think they're filming a movie because there's smoke coming from the World Trade Center." And then there was the "oh my gosh" moment. And they said a plane has hit the second tower. I think a lot of us, our lives changed that day. In fact, I think most of us, our lives changed that day. I know, what did I do? I went straight to work. We were extremely busy. We didn't have TV in the office. We had salespeople coming in all day. We were stacked up. We had salespeople coming in all day saying, "You really need to know what's going on here." I was so focused on myself, my business, and my employees that I totally blocked that out. Then this lovely redhead right here called and said, "You need to get home." Stopped. Why did you do that video before I came up here? Stopped to get food for the family on the way home, and that's when I saw the video. And I, like many of you, will never forget where we were. Until that moment, I was driven by profits, by ego, and by self. That day changed everything for me. And I promise God, get us through this, and I will never think like that again. And so far, thank God, I have been successful. Remember on the roads after that event, how courteous everybody was, waving everybody through traffic. We weren't shaking miscellaneous fingers at each other. We were just kind of going along with our business, trying to be nice to everybody around us. We were still trying to get over what just happened. Senator Lamar Alexander had a quote that I think put it perfectly. He said, "September 11 is one of the worst days, but it brought out the best in us. It unified us as a country and showed our charitable instincts and reminded us of what we stood for and stand for." And I think he hit it right on the head. It changed my life. It changed your life. And let's not forget that. As tonight's hosts, the Hood County Prayer Task Force and the Friends of Memorial Lane Project Committee invite you to join us in remembering the tragic events 17 years ago that impacted our entire country and the world. The events we refer to as 9/11. Please join me in a moment of silence as we begin to remember what we say we will never forget.
Let's pray. Father, on today, on this evening, our hearts and our minds are back to 17 years ago, thinking about where we were, what we were doing, and who we were with. And Father, tonight our hearts are with families who were directly impacted that day and continue to be impacted all these years later. So, Father, we honor the sacrifice of 343 firefighters who gave their lives that day and their families who are still grieving today. And furthermore, we honor the families of 60 police officers from several different agencies in the New York City area who also continue to grieve today, along with 8 emergency medical services personnel who gave their lives that day too. And Father, we acknowledge so many first responders who lost their lives from related diseases over the last several years from events that stemmed on that fateful day. Father, we are overwhelmed with gratitude for those individuals, those who ran in when everybody else was running away. But we also pause to give thanks for our own first responders right here in our own city of Granbury and in Hood County as well. We are overwhelmingly blessed with the most professional, highly ethical, tremendous servants that could be anywhere. We're so thankful. And we acknowledge that all of us must be prepared for anything at any time. We're grateful for your power. We're grateful for your presence in our lives. And we're grateful for your mercies that have been extended to each of us in so many different ways over the past 17 years. And it's in a spirit of gratitude and immense respect that we pray tonight in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Would you stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And would you remain standing while I honor our nation and our flag? In the Battle of 1812 at Fort McHenry, there were a lot of folks that couldn't get up and see what was going on. And so they had to ask the guys up on the ramparts, the guards, the people who were standing sentry, is it still there? He's still there. This is the song that they heard in response to their question. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets rent the air, the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? And the answer is yes.
Let me know if you can't hear me. My name is Kim Winrick, and I'm married to Ted Winrick. who was in the Marine Corps for 21 years, and he now flies for United Airlines. Ted got home from a trip late the night before September 11th. He was sleeping when I left for work that morning. The first plane hit, and news reported it kind of casually. Then the second plane hit, and we realized something was going on. I called Ted, told him to turn on the TV. I went to work. When I arrived at work, everybody had their radios on and listening in disbelief. We were told to go home and be with our families, that the world had changed today and it was never going to be the same. Ted and I sat in front of the TV nonstop. Men don't get scared, men get mad, and Ted was mad. Not only had he lost a dear friend, Michael Horrocks, who was in the plane that hit the Second World Tower, he also no longer felt safe at his work. The first thing he did before sitting down in the cockpit was to pull out the emergency axe, and it stayed next to him throughout the flight. This is how it was for several months. Ted was mad. Here are his words about the friend that he lost. As time passes, the anger and pain of losing a friend lessens. Fortunately, the good memories remain. Michael Robert Horrocks was such a friend, and his life was stolen the morning of September 11th, 2001. Mike was the co-pilot of United Airlines Flight 175, the second plane to hit the World Trade Center, making him one of the first casualties on that day. The evil of a handful of men was evident and is still angering that a dozen box cutters can murder thousands of people in a matter of hours. I had the privilege of serving with Mike as a fellow pilot in the United States Marine Corps and at United Airlines. Our time at a Marine KC-130 squadron overlapped for 3 years, and we flew dozens of missions over 100 hours together. While at United Airlines, our paths crossed at airports all over the United States on a regular basis. It was obvious from the early days of our friendship that Mike was not only a great pilot, he was also a great man. Mike was a leader in all aspects of his life, whether it was his family, church, work, or even his university days as a star quarterback. He could be counted on to be there and to do his best in every situation. When such fine people fall victim to a terror, evil, sometimes you wonder what God was thinking. Mike's wife Miriam described it best in the spring of 2002 issue of the Embraced by the Light newsletter. We, the Horrocks family, have been the recipients of God's love, fleshed out in all of his creatures. As God's people, joined as one, we can't afford to lose our momentum. We must remember that each of us struggles at some time with our own personal tragedy. We as a whole must look for opportunities that may not be as blatant as terrorist attacks to reach out and love one another. Through these actions and prayers, we can make a difference. We must make a difference. Miriam also added a tribute to Mike. Michael left this world, and anyone who knew him can honestly say he made a difference. He wanted a simpler, more loving, and gentle world for his children. He and thousands of others brave souls have begun a tremendous ripple of love, sacrifice, and compassion. Let us all join together to take this ripple and create a powerful wave of love. Let us stand united in God's love. Through Miriam's words, they are from 16 years ago. As we look back now, her words remain powerful and timely. We must always find some good and some love in the face of tragedy. God is that love. In conclusion, Brother Mike, you are still missed. Your family and friends remember your sacred time on this earth, as well as your sacrifice. We will never forget. God bless.
Hi, I'm Paula Noel. Getting started is the hardest part. At 8:46 Eastern Time on that Tuesday morning, when the first plane hit the World Trade Center, my husband Jeff, there in the second row, he and I were driving up 67 toward DFW, where I was booked on a flight to New York LaGuardia's airport. My hotel reservations were at the Marriott at the World Trade Center, which is Building 3, which is where I always stay. I'd been traveling to New York every 3 to 4 weeks that year, working full-time for Chase Manhattan Bank, co-leading a technology project. I worked from home most of the time in Glen Rose, and when I wasn't traveling, I was either on conference calls or online meetings, that type of thing, working from home. I was the first one. Even that morning, as we were driving into Dallas, I had already been on the phone with Tom, a colleague in New York. And I'll tell you more about Tom in a few minutes. Usually I traveled, though, on Sunday nights, so Tuesday morning was different for me. Usually I traveled on Sunday night, came back on Thursday, because I thought those were easier travel times for me. Jeff and I have a son in the 3rd grade at that time, and I changed my plans to go on Tuesday primarily because I had missed so much of Graham, our son's soccer games and various activities, that I thought I would stay and then go on Tuesday. We had meetings later that week. So I stayed. I would normally have been in New York. I would have been in the Marriott. And by that time I would have been in the office. I was an early bird into the office in New York, by New York terms anyway. Anyway, we were heading to Dallas, listening to the radio, and Cindy, you know, that sister-in-law who keeps everybody in the family posted on everything going on, she calls. And Jeff and I were listening to the radio, and she said that they've grounded all the planes in New York, you're not going to New York, and a plane hit the World Trade Center. And we're like going, oh, Cindy, you know. And so we started looking on the radio, going back and forth between the channels trying to find it, and finally the broadcast started. Then the second plane hit. That's when we all knew that it wasn't an accident, that there were no words to say what we felt, and I cried and cried and cried in that car. Wept is a better word. And of course my phone started ringing. Mainly my mother, family members calling, and cousins and people I hadn't talked to on the phone ever calling to see where I was. And at the same time, I'm trying to cry, a good cry, and I was trying to find some people in Texas that were headed to New York, and then calling people in New York who were expecting me as well. Couldn't reach anybody in New York. The lines were jammed with call volume. And I did reach one Texas colleague, and her plane was stopped on the tarmac in Houston, so she didn't take off. And then Jeff and I talked about it earlier. Neither one of us can remember exactly what we did or what we saw after that. We know we watched television somewhere in some store. We don't know when exactly or where, but we did see it, and my mom and dad came that night and spent the night with us. And they stayed with us on that anniversary for several years. They would just come just so we could be together. I do know that I called the school, and they got my 3rd grader out so I could talk to him on the phone. And he, you know, said, Mom, okay, thanks. And I just told him that I wasn't going to New York. So he goes, fine, because they didn't know, but I didn't know that. So they got him for me. In the days that followed, I did talk to many colleagues firsthand about what had happened. Keith, my co-project leader, was coming up out of the subway station underneath the World Trade Center just after the first plane hit. And as he came out, he said he knew immediately something was horribly, horribly wrong. He said there was debris on the street, and he said every head, he felt like the street was slowed down, people were not running around like they normally do, and every head was turned at the same angle, looking up. And he ran by, and he heard comments like, and he started running as fast as he could. He said, it's that slow motion run, though. And he ran about 4 blocks is where our Chase offices were from the World Trade Center complex. And he heard people say, "Are they making a movie?" Same thing. They shouldn't be doing this now. You know, is it an accident? But he just ran. He said when he got there, everybody in the office was at the windows, and the second plane had hit by the time he got up. And they stood there. They had to shelter in place. Alarms were going off in the Chase building, sheltered in place for hours and hours. But he said, we stood there helpless, listening to like little radios and things, and looked and waited. And he said they wept, they called, tried to call family members, but they just waited. I would have been there, had I been in New York that day in my normal schedule, I would have been there in the office with them, in those offices. He said that they were eventually evacuated by security out of the building, and most everybody crossed the Brooklyn Bridge. Some walked uptown, but everybody walked home. There was no transportation to be had. And you saw those people walking across the Brooklyn Bridge. That's where I would have gone, because I have stayed at the Brooklyn Marriott as well. When I went back to New York for the first time after that, it was in December, and I was on a Sunday night flight to go back on Thursday, and it was eerily quiet on a small group on the airplane. And everybody was friendly, talking, caring about other people in a way you just don't see. And talking to the hotel manager there, which I stayed at the Brooklyn Marriott that trip, he said that as people came across the bridge, many of them came into the hotel and into many of the businesses there for help. They were hurt. He said they were bleeding. People were missing shoes, shirts. And he said, but one of the things that he noticed most is everybody was covered, most everybody was covered in that white ash. He said you couldn't tell the color of their clothes, the color of their skin, but they were thirsty, coughing, hungry, hurt, and they helped them best they could. And coincidentally, there's a group of doctors in the hotel that morning for some type of workshop, and they ended up just creating a little triage unit there in the hotel and helped as many people as they could. Tom, the guy I talked about earlier, I talked with him on the phone, and I didn't talk to him for several weeks after 9/11. When I did talk to him, he said that he told me that if it had not been for our telephone call that morning, he would have been in a meeting on the 31st floor in the North Tower of the World Trade Center when the first plane hit. He also lost a nephew at the Pentagon that day, so he had been with family all of that time. When we first talked about it, he said, I would have been right over there in the midst of it. I heard so many stories that I could spend a lot of time. I know I'm over. But every story counts, and every story matters, and every story should be told. So let's remember that. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sergeant First Class Retired Stevens. Doug asked me to come out here today and kind of talk on the perspective how 9/11 impacted me and my family. I was already in the military. I'd been in for 4 years, and I was stationed at Fort Hood. And I was in BNOC, which now they call WLC or whatever name for the this month. And 9/11 happened. We were outside taking a smoke break, and instructors pulled us in. And they sent us all back to our units to help secure Fort Hood. Initially, we did that for like, I think it was a 4-day rotation. Then we finally got to go home to visit our family. Then that's when it really hit me, because I actually got to start seeing the videos and seeing what the impact on our country was. And like a young lady said earlier, that men get mad. And I remember sitting there at my house sobbing like a big baby for the first responders and everybody that was involved with 9/11 New York, but also being mad and being ready for revenge. Revenge might be a bad word, but that's what we were ready for. So after that, my brother, Riley Stevens, he was in SFAS at the time, and he graduated and immediately went over to Afghanistan. Army had different plans for me. I went over to Hawaii, and they deployed me about a year later into Iraq to fight the war on terrorism. The whole thing has affected my family, not only because of the deployments and everything, but some of y'all know I lost my brother in 2012 in Afghanistan, trying to protect us here over the 9/11 incident. So I appreciate everybody on the memorial side and what they do here. And I also want to say to the soldiers that are in back, if y'all joined after 9/11, I really want to say thank you, because we were already at war. And that took a lot of courage to sign that dotted line and go and take it to our enemy. And I do appreciate you continue serving. Carry the torch on. That's really my perspective. So since 9/11. Sergeant Vasquez here is going to speak also on her perspective.
My name's Sergeant Vasquez. I served in OEF and OIF. I was already in when 9/11 happened, and I remember where I was at, what I was doing. Most importantly, I remember how it made me feel. I was upset. Not just men aren't the only ones who get angry. The saying, there's no wrath like a woman scorned or whatever. But I was really upset. At the time, I was working as an aviation mechanic, and I thought, well, how am I going to serve? How much, I want to be more useful, more of an asset to my country. So I figured, I'm working on helicopters. I was like, and with my dark skin and my dark complexion, you cover this and I look just like them. So I thought, okay, I'm going to switch over to the intel field. So I spoke with my superiors and I said, you know what? I need to change MOSs, which is a military occupational specialty. And they said, okay, let's do this. You want to be an MI? And I said, yes, I do. So they put me in and I got my background check and got my TS-SCI clearance, and boom, they sent me to Afghanistan. Went to Afghanistan, did my time there, and it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me. So I thought, okay, we finished with our deployment, came back, and I thought, okay, now what, So I volunteered to go to Iraq. I was told, no, you're not going to go to Iraq. You need to get yourself taken care of. You've been gone for so long. Take care of your family, do this and do that. And I said, well, I know that my family's important, but these soldiers that I deployed with, they became my family. So I said, I want to go back. I need to go back. I need to go to Iraq with everybody else. So I volunteered. First they said no, and then they said, hey, go get your bags ready. Your wish came true, you're going to Iraq. Served in Iraq, and then, for lack of better words, stuff went bad. And I was medevaced from Iraq in '04. I've had 35 surgeries since then. And, I got out, and that's pretty much all she wrote for me. But I continue to try to help my brothers and sisters in arms. Even though I can't be there by their side, I've had several call, and I try to help them with PTSD and suicide. So that's my story. I'm Sergeant Vasquez.
Well, Tony, that's kind of a tough act to follow too. So I feel your pain. Those are the guys that are guys and gals with boots on the ground that we owe so much to. They're where the rubber meets the road, and we appreciate every one of you out there who have been there and who are there now and who are planning on going. As clearly as a winter morning, I still remember exactly what I was doing on September the 11th, 2001. It was a Tuesday, like today. Interestingly enough, 9/11 does not fall on Tuesday again until 2029. I was hanging gutters on our just completed retirement home in Boerne, Texas. Like the rest of the nation, I spent the remainder of that day glued to the TV, videotaping everything that I saw, and I've still got about 12 hours of videotapes. I retired from the Navy in the mid-90s. My last duty station after 28 years as a naval aviator was a joint tour of duty working for General Horner at NORAD, but I was actually stationed at March Air Force Base in Riverside, California. I was the deputy commander of the Southwest Air Defense Sector. That'll ring a bell with you because we're going to talk about the Northeast Air Defense Sector, and I'm going to take a little different approach here. The Southwest Air Defense Sector, short for SWADS, and you'll hear me talk about needs in a minute, and that's the Northeast Air Defense Sector. But we were tasked to identify every aircraft along the coastal United States and in Canada. We launched armed F-16's interceptor in a matter of minutes on any unidentified contact. We had 30 radar scopes on our floor, manned 24/7, and we were right next to a customs center that also had 30 radar scopes, and they were primarily doing drug interdiction on the southwest border, which is a whole nother story. But we knew every airplane that was moving on the coast. And if you've never seen a radar picture of Los Angeles International Airport with airplanes coming and going, I can only describe it as a lighted fire ant bed that somebody has kicked. And that's what it looks like, a freeway. If you ever saw it, you probably wouldn't want to fly into LAX or any other airport for that matter. It's amazing how many airplanes are actually in the sky at any given moment. So that's what we did in the Southwest sector. We had F-16s on alert from Oregon to Brownsville, Texas. And they were, depending on the threat, at the time, they were either required to be airborne in 3 minutes or 6 minutes or 8 minutes, depending on the threat. The Northeast sector needs in Rome, New York, was our mirror image on the Northeast coast. Those of us who are old enough here, JC, probably remember the DEW line. How many people have heard of the DEW line? Okay. The DEW line was the distance early warning line that was across the polar cap because we were concerned about Russians flying bombers over the polar ice cap and bombing us. So that was kind of the beginning of the air defense sectors. The problem with the air defense sector on 9/11 was that everything was looking out. Nothing was looking in. Nobody had ever thought about a terrorist threat coming from inside our country. The 9/11 Commission report praised the work of the Northeast sector. Unfortunately, just 9 minutes elapsed from the first FAA call to needs until American Flight 11 hit the first tower. Not enough time to get fighters airborne and on target. Unfortunately, all the air control agencies were working the aircraft takeovers as a hijacking. And so nobody was planning on shooting down any airplanes, not initially, until the second tower was hit, and then the shock and disbelief of what we were seeing became real. As a pilot, I can relate to the unbelievably heroic efforts of Captain John Oganowski as he tried to alert FAA by repeatedly clicking the mic button in his cockpit as he was bleeding out from stab wounds in the cockpit of American Flight 11. Probably the second casualty. The first casualty was an Israeli basic, like a Delta Force guy from Israel, and apparently they knew he was on the plane because they had a terrorist right behind him. And the thinking is that when he stood up to try to do something, the guy behind him just slashed his throat. So he was the first death. And then I think about the cell phone calls that were made by flight attendants Betty Young and Amy Sweeney with information about the hijacking and injuries to passengers and crew. Their messages in the waning moments of their lives allowed investigators to determine the identities of the terrorists, where they were sitting, and who they were. Where do we get such men and women? There's a bunch of them standing around you right back here. There are many stories like this. There are stories in every airplane and at Ground Zero in New York. I encourage you to do some research so that you never forget what happened on that day. Now, if you'll allow me, I'm going to switch to the brighter side a little bit. In early October 2001, my nephew Don, who fortunately I got to help train when he went through flight training in the Navy, called me. And we were living in Bernie. He was living in Granbury. By then he was a pilot for American Airlines, living in Granbury. Don excitedly told me about American Airlines first officer and retired naval aviator, Mike Burr, who was organizing a Run the Flag Across America event. This month-long run would serve as a demonstration of resolve and in support of the victims' families of American Flight 11 and United Flight 175, which Paula spoke of. As combat veterans and former naval aviators, it was a no-brainer that we had to be a part of this run. So we signed up, and the flag that was so carefully carried on that run, that lasted over a month, non-stop, was flown over Iraq in the cockpit of an F-16 Viper in support of Operation Southern Watch on October the 2nd, 2001. The runners left Boston on October the 11th, 2001, scheduled to arrive in Los Angeles following the route of flight of the two airplanes on November the 11th, Veterans Day. The two cities represented the flight plan of both airplanes. So Don and I left Granbury early on Friday morning, October 26, 2001, planning to meet the flag shortly after it entered East Texas out of Louisiana near the town of Wascom. We met the organizers at an outpost in Marshall, got our obligatory T-shirts, parked our car, jumped in a van for transportation to meet the flag group. The weather was chilly, good for running, tough on the lungs. And I don't think I had really run since I retired in '94, so now we're 2001, but my brain still thought I could do it. So heading west on US 80, we were shocked into action as the van driver shouted, "Here they come, get ready to jump out." I'm not sure what I expected, but it seemed like they would all stop, we'd shake hands, do a few high fives, and start out on a leisurely pace for the new guys. Instead, the van driver does a quick U-turn, rolls out in front of the group about 50 yards. We hit the ground running, and before I took my first breath, the big guy next to me handed me the flag and says, "You carry it, I'm tired." You can probably ask these Marines, running about an 8-minute mile carrying a full-size American flag with your hands like this is not an easy thing to do. I found out quickly that my mind was writing a check that my body couldn't cash. These guys look like marathoners, and I look like the Pillsbury Doughboy. Fortunately, Don was 20 years my junior, and it wasn't long until I handed him the flag, being that I was a senior officer aboard, you know, so. Is that right, JC? Is that the way it works? All right. So we all took turns rotating through the camera van, getting water, and watching the group carry Old Glory, and the airline flight crews carrying the airline flags. Only air crew were allowed to carry the airline flags, and that's as it should be. Pardon me. In 28 years of military service to this great nation, I have experienced the emotional peaks and valleys that go with the trade. The goosebumps and chills that surround displays of patriotism and love of country. The loss of friends, squadron mates, and loved ones. However, I'm not sure that I have ever been more proud of this country and its people than when we ran the flag into those small hamlets along US 80. Entire towns lined the streets, schools let out, kids were reverently watching the procession in wonderment, and then, as if on cue, the shouting and cheering began. If that didn't make you tear up, nothing would. In respect for a great nation, under God, never forget. Thank you.
C.G. Montemare, firefighter paramedic, Toller Fire Department. On September 11th, 2001, my day started just as any other day did. I got up to go to school. I was a junior in high school. I woke up that morning and decided I didn't want to go to school, so my parents said I had to stay home. I went back to bed and shortly woke up about 9:30. TV was on and I saw what had happened. I still remember what I was wearing that day. I immediately felt fear, anger, and helpless. I sat and watched the news footage for about 20 minutes. I then went outside and told my dad what had happened. I began to talk to him about what had happened, and my dad traveled a lot. He traveled to work job sites through the airlines. I began to help him, and we talked more about what had happened. Later that day, my friends called to check on me. They knew my dad traveled for work a lot, and they were concerned he was on one of the flights, since I was not at school. I was thankful he was not on any of those flights. The next few days, I felt nervous and scared each time I saw a plane fly over my house, due to living near a power plant. I saw all the firefighters, police officers, EMTs, paramedics, working 24/7, and I thought of how proud I was of all of them. I was proud to be American. I felt pride in watching those heroes. I then began thinking about how it could help my community if something like that happened in the small town Toller that I live in. I asked a friend who was a local volunteer firefighter what needed to be done to join. And yes, I had also previously chased fire trucks, just as every other fireman does. My friend said that I had to be 18 to join, which I was only 17 at the time. I was sad and excited about the same time. I was sad I couldn't join right away, but excited that I would have the chance to join once I turned 18. The day finally came that I was able to join Toller VFD in November 2004. I was proud. I began running medical calls, accidents, and fires, and anything else in between. I was having the time of my life helping others. I had a sense of pride and accomplishment after every call. Such a simple small could make you feel good. I can only imagine what the heroes of 9/11 felt like. It gave me a new appreciation for their tireless work and bravery. Volunteering set the tone for my career. I later attended Fire Academy, EMT school, and after that, paramedic school. I was able to become a full-time paid career firefighter in January 2005. In 2015, I added deputy fire marshal to my duties and also attended police academy. I also worked full-time as a deputy sheriff in Hood County for close to 3 years. I am thankful and blessed to be able to serve my community in various roles, and we will never forget the sacrifices made on September 11, 2001.
My name is Brent Blackman. I'm with the Granbury Police Department. I'm a detective, and I'm also fire chief here in Granbury currently. I'm going to read a verse, Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, Here I am, send me. Please bow with me right quick. Father God, we want to thank you for this opportunity to gather together in a free country. We thank you for the love and mercy you rain down upon us every day. Thank you for those that served before us, the ones currently serving, and those that will follow after us. We recognize and honor the sacrifice that those gave on that tragic day. We ask that you put your loving and protecting hands over our police, fire, military, and bless their families. We love you, God. This we pray in your heavenly name. Amen.
You say you'll never forget where you were when you heard the news on September 11th, 2001. Neither will I. I was on the 110th floor in a smoke-filled room with a man who called his wife to say goodbye. I held his fingers steady as he dialed. I gave him the piece to say, Honey, I'm not going to make it. But it's okay. I'm ready to go. I was with his wife when he called as she fed breakfast to their children. I held her up as she tried to understand his words. And as she realized he wasn't coming home that night. I was in the stairwell of the 23rd floor when a woman cried out to me for help. I've been knocking on the door of your heart for 50 years. I said, of course, I'll show you the way home. Only believe in me now. I was at the base of the building when the priest ministered to the injured and devastated souls. I took him home to tend his flock in heaven. He heard my voice and answered. I was on all 4 of those planes, in every seat, with every prayer. I was with the crew as they were overtaken. I was in the very hearts of the believers there, comforting and assuring them that their faith has saved them. I was in Texas, Kansas, London. I was standing next to you when you heard the terrible news. Did you sense me? I want you to know that I saw every face. I knew every name, though not all know me. Some met me for the first time on the 86th floor. Some sought me with their last breath. Some couldn't hear me calling to them through the smoke and flames. Come to me, this way, take my hand. Some chose, for the final time, to ignore me. But I was there. I did not place you in the tower that day. You may not know why, but I do. However, if you were there in that explosive moment in time, would you have reached for me? September 11th, 2001 was not the end of the journey for you. But someday your journey will end, and I'll be there for you as well. Seek me now while I may be found. Then, at any moment, you know you're ready to go. I will be in the stairwell of your final moments. Remember, I love you.
Try to get this done before the train comes through. Raise this up to adult height here. Good evening. My name is Justin McGuire. I'm a police officer with the City of Granbury and have been for 11 years and 9 months. I've been asked tonight to share with you my memories of September 11, 2001. On this horrendous day, I was an active duty U.S. Navy 3rd Class Petty Officer Hospital Corpsman stationed at Marine Corps Air Station, Cherry Point, North Carolina, as a surgical technologist. Prior to this day, my life and future were going on as planned. Just a month prior to this date, I experienced the happiest time in my life by getting engaged to my now wife of almost 17 years, who was also active duty. On this day, I went from planning a joyous wedding, to planning a quick wedding, to planning possible deployment, to answering the call of bringing those responsible for this act of terror to justice. Time out. Okay, game on. This possible deployment came to fruition in January of 2002, just 4 months after September 11, 2001, and short of a month after getting married. I was tasked with joining Joint Task Force 160, Fleet Hospital 20, Camp Lejeune, working in a battalion aid station and setting up Fleet Hospital as part of a surgical team at Camp X-Ray, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, to provide medical attention to the Al-Qaeda and Taliban terrorists. When this decision was made, a lot of emotions came to the forefront. The biggest was, how do you provide medical attention to those that every day have planned out to kill Americans or have killed Americans? While working in Camp X-Ray, these emotions or feelings were constant, with the eyes of Al-Qaeda and Taliban terrorists constantly watching you, looking for an opportunity to hurt you. Although these feelings were going on, I found comfort in God, knowing that these scum, it's a cleaned up word, would be held accountable for their actions, and that my job was to get them to that point. Therefore, I continued my service as a police officer and as a first-class petty officer, Master at Arms in the U.S. Navy Reserve. I could talk more about my time there, but I must keep this short and try and cut into it. So I thank you for allowing me to share my experience with you. We must never forget those 2,977 that died on September 11, 2001, and those some 7,000 who have died in the fight to ensure this kind of tragedy never hits our shores again. May God keep us strong and swift in this fight, and may God bless America.
I'm Deputy Looper with Hood County Sheriff's Office, and I'm not worthy to stand with these men and women that have come and spoke to you before, but I'm sure proud that I'm here with them. Follow along with me as I read from Matthew chapter 5, verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Bow with me in prayer. Our Father in heaven, when events like September 11th shake our land, we know that you're in heaven, that you're not taken by surprise. As fearful as we stand during those times, we know that you're in control. We thank you for the men and women that sacrificed their lives that day, and the men and women that have sacrificed their lives since then. Lord, may you bless their families. And may you bless those people that put their lives on the line every day. Thank you for the hard-working men and women that keep America going. We pray that all in your Son's name. Amen.
America, the land of the free and home of the brave. She's the country with privileges so many crave. But her freedoms and liberties came with a price. Many of her valiant soldiers gave the ultimate sacrifice. Her past and present have started to collide, repeated mistakes, and her people are quick to divide. But during these times, there's always a certain few who hear the call to fight until the end, to make sure their country will never fall. These fearless patriots are a remarkable breed. They demonstrate strong morals and remain faithful to their creed. Possessed with a tenacious stance, one cannot help but notice their never quit attitude with every glance. Courageous men and women have shed blood, sweat, and tears, not for the recognition or glory, but so others can live peacefully without any fears. America, the beautiful and the bold. She's the country where the patriotic spirit will forever hold. And even at our lowest times, the stars and stripes will continue to wave because of heroic few, because of the brave. Thank you.
Lots of good stuff tonight. If you'll please join me in the benediction. God our Father, giver of life, we entrust the United States of America to your loving care. You are the rock on which this country was founded. You alone are the true source of our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Reclaim this land to your glory and dwell among your people. Send your Spirit to touch the hearts of our nation's leaders. Open their minds to the great worth of human life and responsibilities of human freedom. Remind your people that true happiness is rooted in seeking and doing your will. We dedicate this service to your honor. We realize that often we bond during times of crisis, but soon forget that above all else in this country, we are all Americans. We pray that as one nation under God, we reach out to our neighbors, family, and friends to create environments that are good for all people, no matter the race or religion. That we always bond to look for the good in our country and to remember that we still live in a country where we can be thankful for your amazing grace.